partner, parent, child, or even some internet troll that's stressing you out, you are in the right place. We're going to discover how we can find peace within ourselves and transform the relationships in our lives. To teach us how, we are speaking to an extraordinary woman, Jackie Manning from JackieManning.com. Let me tell you a bit about Jackie. She is a psychologist and relationship expert. She was an eHarmony dating and relationship expert and a residential psychologist for Clio and Yours magazine. She's coming to us from Sydney, Australia, and I'm thrilled to have her. This is her first time in the Tapping World Summit. Jackie, welcome.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you for having me.
I love it when I hear about psychologists that have incorporated tapping into their practice. I know you're using it in your practice. You've used it even on TV. Can you tell us a bit why it's a modality that you felt so called to use?
Yeah, I really love tapping because it bridges that gap between the East and West kind of thinking. Where it's like some psychologists can be so caught up with just working with the mind, but we're all one being, and so the energy system within our body is part of that. And I was thrilled when I was introduced to tapping very early in my career. Actually, I was working at the time at a college system here in Australia called TAFE, and as part of our working life we got staff development weeks, and so different presenters would come in and teach us things. And this guy came in and taught us tapping one of the sessions, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. I'd never heard of meridians before. I'd never heard of tapping. And in that moment, I thought it was interesting, but then I thought the next presenter was interesting too. So it didn't catch me straight away. But that same year, maybe 3 months later, I'd had some surgery. And as part of that recovery process, I had to do this thing one night. I had to change this dressing. And it was intense pain. It was like extraordinary pain. And I was sitting there feeling really sorry for myself, and tapping just popped into my head. And I thought, oh, what the hell? I'll give it a go. And so I did some tapping for the pain, and no word of a lie, it just took the pain away. So it was one of those lightning bolt moments that you can get with tapping, but not always. For me as a therapist, I was like, wow, this is fantastic, because anxiety is so pervasive in everyone, really. At some time or other, we'll all experience anxiety. So I was thrilled to have this tool to use in my practice, because not only does it help clients, but it helps me as a therapist as well, and not take on everyone's energy. It helps me somehow discharge that. So I was
and something that your clients can do at home. So it's not just they see you, but then they also go home and they have a tool.
100%. And you kind of give it to them and they take it and mold it to how they want to use it. So I've had clients over the years who've self-regulated into knowing that they need 30 minutes of tapping to get a peaceful night's sleep. 30 minutes is quite a long time in our busy day and age. I tend to recommend 5 to 10 minutes regularly to clients to begin with, at least. I love it that they can tap at 2 a.m. or 10 times a day. It doesn't, whenever something comes up for them, I think that's a real gift, that rather than holding on to whatever distress they're experiencing for a week or 3 weeks or however long their next appointment might be.
Yeah. And when clients come to you for the first time, do you find that you need to explain to them how it works or how to look at their stress in a new way? I mean, day one with a client, you're introducing tapping, you're introducing this kind of awareness of how stress might be impacting us in different ways. How does that come up?
Yeah, look, I used to spend almost a whole session in discussing how tapping works and where it was founded and how it came to be. But then I felt that clients can explore that information if they want to. So I'm like, this is really a fantastic tool. I can teach it to you. You can ask me questions, and then I try and find an immediate thing they're aware of. So often I ask them to scan their body and to find perhaps a physical tension. And a lot of clients are quite anxious in their first session when they come and see me. And so I try and get them to identify that. And to then test it out on that to see if it's bringing relief. It can be fluid sometimes. Sometimes I just get clients to start tapping while they're talking with me. Or they'll start talking about something and I can see the distress rising in their body. So I ask them, do you mind if we pause and I'll teach you this tool, and then we'll continue the therapy session while doing some continuous tapping. And most people are fine to do that. And something I've noticed over the years too, and it's not that I notice it when they walk in, I don't notice a tension in their face necessarily, but often at the end of a session, I can observe that their faces look more relaxed. They look different. And so to me, that's a real reflection of them letting go of some of the tension, stress, and anxiety they've been carrying with them, and how quickly that can work for them.
Definitely. Well, Jackie, you are the relationship expert. You've been on TV talking about relationships. You have people in your private practice who come to you for support with relationships. So when there's someone in our life that is stressing us out, where do we even begin? Especially because the other person might not be tapping. So how do we start?
Yeah, it's a really good question. People are going to stress us out. There's going to be old pain we're carrying, perhaps from childhood. There's going to be relationships at work, relationships with friends, relationships, our love relationships as well. And we carry a lot of weight if we keep adding to our bucket of stress. And that's a concept I'll come to in a second about how I teach clients about this too. We get filled up. And so then we might have an interaction with someone and it feels overwhelming. It feels really hurtful or distressing. And sometimes it can be, I want to make the caveat that some people find themselves in friendships or relationships that can be abusive. So I'm not talking about those here, but I'm talking about our interactions day to day with our kids, our partners, our families, that we can kind of get this erupting feeling, this trigger comes. And yes, sometimes it might be a difficult situation on the surface, but often it's about what's underneath. I'm going to draw you a picture, Jess, to show you what I mean, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
And how tapping can be instrumental in relieving some of this stress. So I'm going to draw it and show you in stages to the camera. So this is something, I hope you can see it, called the emotional well or the stress bucket. And we all have one. I've got one, you've got one, all my clients have one. And into this bucket comes our experiences of life. So some of them positive, some of them negative, but we tend to store the negative ones. They come in. That could be conversations, breakups, our dynamic in the family that we grew up with. It all comes in here. Now, I guess some clients sometimes come to see me hoping I can give them a magic umbrella or something to stop me from coming in. But of course I can't. That's part of life.
Like you're not going to change your mother-in-law.
No. 100%.
That's what you mean, right? There's like certain people you're just not going to change.
100%. But to keep a healthy energy system and to keep a feeling more balanced, we want to try and release some of the tensions that we experience in life. So down the bottom here, you'll see there's some little outlets. Now, this can be anything you find grounding or that brings you back to yourself, keeps you in flow, keeps you healthy. So for some people, that might be surfing. For some people, that might be painting. These outlets can be variable. One that I think most people need is sleep. So sometimes when you're lacking sleep, things can feel more overwhelming. Sometimes when this comes in too thick and fast, or you haven't really processed, you haven't done any self-work, you haven't really processed old hurts and pains, these outlets can get a little bit ineffective and a bit clogged up. And so you're still doing them perhaps, but they're not releasing the tension that you're feeling. But these stressors don't stop coming. And so when that happens, your stress levels can start to feel a bit heavy. You might be getting a bit full. And eventually over time, you can get filled to the brim. When it's been sitting there for a long time, I like to try and imagine if you've got a garbage bin or a bucket outside and it fills with rain, but there's no movement in that bucket, it just stays stagnant. You can see the water goes cloudy, it goes a bit toxic. And so that's what's unhelpful about what we store. Anxiety and stress can be healthy, but there can be that toxic level. And that's when there's no movement, no acknowledgement of it, no processing of it, and it just stays stuck. A lot of family of origin stress can be tucked right away and people don't want to think about it, compacted to the side, and the really toxic stuff. So it gets a bit murky and sludgy in there. And then we go around in our daily life and perhaps something happens, a conversation with your mother-in-law or whoever, and it's like a little drop coming into your bucket, but you can experience a spillover. And yeah, exactly. And now people express their spillovers in various ways. So some people might get filled with rage, other people might burst into tears or turn inwards and really turn it against themselves, but they can feel that it's intense. It's really, really, over the top, overwhelming. And then that adds to the stress because people start to go, oh my God, it was just a small conversation or a small event. Could be as simple as missing your bus, for example, even something that's not related to a person, or maybe it's related to the bus driver. And then they start to think, what's wrong with me? I'm reacting to this, but you're not reacting to that. You're reacting to everything else that you're storing. And I teach this model to clients when I'm introducing tapping, actually, because for me, tapping's a big outlet. I use it a lot. So it's one of my go-tos but I don't expect that from every client. But if they tap regularly and over time, it's like getting a little needle every time you tap and piercing some of this stuff out of your system so the pressure doesn't remain and you can drain. And then these outlets can overtake your release, and keeping tapping there is just a way of keeping it flowing so you don't feel as stuck. And this is really relevant when we're interacting with people. Like you said in your introduction, we are social beings. We need people. We're tribal, in our very DNA, we need to be with a tribe of some sorts. And so when we feel disconnected from people, that can feel intensely worrying and fearful and stressful as well. But if you're carrying all this, how do you release it? I mean, tapping's honestly one of the best tools I've come across in my time to keep that flow happening for yourself. And, a bit about my personality, I like to learn new things. I like to experiment and explore. But I've stuck with tapping since 1999 because I believe it's so effective and easy to use.
Right. Jackie, I loved your illustration and that part in the top where there is this interaction and suddenly it is overflowing and we might have had an outburst or we just might be feeling horrible and we're obsessing over that little situation and thinking, why am I so upset? Like, how has this gotten so out of control, without seeing the entire bucket and without really taking a step back and looking at what's really going on. But the reality is, in those moments, I've been there. I don't have the capacity. Like, none of us, when we're that stressed out and having a hard time, have the mental capacity to say, oh, my bucket's been overflowing because of all these other things. We're just emotional and we feel hijacked by these emotions. So Jackie, I'd love to do some tapping. There might be people thinking about events and they're feeling the intensity and they can measure that. We can measure before and after. But if nothing comes up, if someone's bucket isn't completely overflowing, let's tap anyway, because that's the best way that we can learn. So me and the listeners will repeat after you.
Okay, sounds great. So start here and just say, I'm feeling overwhelmed.
I'm feeling overwhelmed.
I can't even think straight.
I can't even think straight.
Can't believe this has happened.
I can't believe this happened.
I just need to get away.
I just need to get away.
And find a safe place.
And find a safe place.
What if I am in a safe place?
What if I am in a safe place?
And I can just breathe.
And I can just breathe.
I can get through this.
I can get through this.
I just need some time.
I just need some time.
I feel it in my, if you say after me, Jess, I feel it in my stomach.
I feel it in my stomach.
I feel it in my head.
I feel it in my head.
My throat's so tight.
My throat is so tight.
My chest is tight.
My chest is tight.
But what if I can breathe?
But what if I can breathe?
What if my body can let go?
What if my body can let go?
And what if I'm okay?
And what if I'm okay?
And I can feel some peace returning.
And I can feel some peace today.
And then taking a deep breath, I'd probably ask you to scan your body to pinpoint an area that you might be containing it in. It might be everywhere. And if it's everywhere, you go with that. But if I mentioned stomach and head and chest and throat, because they're very common experiences for people to locate that painful feeling in that part of their body. I'm a real stomach person. If I'm anxious, I feel sick and nauseous. I don't tend to get the head pressure.
I'm a chest and throat.
Chest and throat, yeah.
Especially
really
when it comes to like with conflicts with another person, that kind of speaking up and communicating, I can get really tight. Yeah. So that was fantastic. And it was so simple. And I think it's important to point that out, because sometimes we don't do something because we think, oh, that sounds so simple. But when we just give ourselves that space, we do really feel a shift. And I'd like to break down a little bit what you did. You started with just acknowledging, like you said, where we feel it in our body, saying it out loud, acknowledging the feeling, and then simply moving to safety, kind of just getting ourselves back into our body, back into this room, very present. So I think that's a nice framework for someone when they want to do it themselves. Start with how you're feeling, right? And then get back into your body and move towards safety.
Yeah, 100%. Go with where the energy is. If your energy is frizzled everywhere, you're going to need to just do what we did, go through the process. Your body will calm down. It might take more rounds than what we did. It might not, but it will bring some relief. And the way you can notice that is that often people will take a deeper breath or even yawn, or there's some sort of release from their body. So that's like, okay. And you may want to continue on and work through what's just happened and give yourself some relief from the interaction that sparked this. Or you may have had enough, but that it's going where the energy is. And people can sometimes be surprised with what that might be. But I think the body is very wise, and I think it will tell you what you need to focus on. And finding that safe place is another beauty of tapping, isn't it? That it can be done on the go. You don't have to have the right setting and the candle on or whatever. You can do it on the toilet, or you can do it wherever you can. It's people with young kids, that's their safe place. So bathrooms are a real winner sometimes.
Yeah. So when we do that tapping, when you're talking about that bucket, so it's like just doing that tapping helps it so that it's not overflowing. So I imagine at this point, it's easier to look at that bucket and go, what's in here? What is really making this difficult? And sometimes, like you said, you realize I haven't slept. And sometimes it's easy. It's like, oh, I haven't slept. I had a bad night and this is why. Or sometimes you look at that bucket and you see a pattern. You're like, wow, when someone says this to me or when I'm in the situation, it's really triggering. And we find ourselves kind of attracting and repeating this situation. Let's talk about triggers for a second. So when we are looking closely, we're more calm and we're like, there's a pattern here. What does that mean? What is a trigger?
A trigger is basically an emotional response that's very visceral and noticeable. And it can come from something someone says to us. It can come from an experience. It's you feel it, and you feel it intense emotion, hurt, anger, pain, sadness. And but when you settle that down, a trigger often relates to the past. Not always, but often it is a pattern that's been set up. Perhaps in your family, you were the fixer, the one that helped your family resolve conflicts. And so in your life, you feel, okay, I have to resolve this conflict. It's on me. The pressure's on me, rather than being allowed to just be and to let it happen and let it flow around you and do your part, but not feel responsible for it. The trigger part will be the tension or anxiety or response that you feel that feels like it's life or death. And that's not overstating it sometimes. So a good way to identify a trigger is to ask yourself questions like, when have I felt this before? Or what's the first time I felt like this? Or what's the last time I felt like this? To really try and run through some scenarios in your head, because while the upset might seem so related to that one person, co-worker, friend, husband, whatever, if you stop and ask yourself those questions of, have I ever felt this way before? Often the answer is yes. And so then you can look at a pattern of what's led to that. And often it's going through experiences that we tuck away and we don't want to think about because they're painful. But often bringing them out to the light with tapping is a way of unhooking you from the trigger. So the experience itself might still be not very pleasant, or it might be unhappy. Tapping's not a magic wand. It's not going to erase things from your mind. But what it does beautifully, and even for massive things like trauma and those kind of experiences, is when you think of those situations, or those situations are reflected in your life, you won't feel it in the same way. It will be more resolved and more unhooked from your system. And the simplest way I get clients to do that is make a list. We run through situations. Like, I ask them, when have you felt this before? Who has made you feel this way? Write it down. Sometimes thought bubbles come, and it can be good information and a good mechanism to use tapping, to have a list of significant emotional events in your life. Maybe it's a teacher that made you feel dumb, or maybe it's your parent overlooking you, and you're feeling really overlooked in the conversation you've just had, and you remember a scenario from when you were 4 that was really painful, and not to overthink it. So as an adult, we can look back to experiences we've had as a child, and some of them can seem quite trivial to the adult brain, but you weren't that adult back then. You were a little kid who was experiencing deep hurt, and that's okay. So go in there and try and smooth that out, bring some peace to that little person that's inside you, because what that does is that gets some of the gunk out of your bucket, so that when you interact with a work colleague or friend, that little person hurt won't be there in quite the same way anymore.
Yeah. I find that it is so much easier to have self-compassion when we take that step back and we see a pattern and we realize this reaction is me reacting to something that did happen to that little child. So it's not that I'm crazy or, emotionally unwell. It's just, you see it, and with understanding, I find is easier to have more compassion. The other thing that comes to mind, and I find this is much easier to see in other people than it is to see in ourselves. We all have that friend who dated the same guy, but 3 different people, right? Like, we see in our friends and our relationships how we attract the same kind of people and relationships and triggers. And that person might think, oh, well, all men are like this, or all women are like this. But there is something with the way that they're reacting that they're attracting, not always, but I found it in my own life, just attracting the same situation over and over again. It will keep coming until you look at it closely and resolve or learn whatever you need to learn from that relationship to stop bringing that into your life. Do you find that to be true? Have you seen that a lot with your clients?
100%. And I think that often the things, when I'm working with couples and talk about what the conflicts are between the two of them, going back to their family history is kind of essential, because it will often just be a real match, that the problems they're having reflect problems that they had growing up, or that they observed growing up, perhaps. I think relationships are one way, a really key way, that we do have the opportunity to resolve childhood pain. So, like you said, you have to attend to it. You have to look at it, acknowledge it, process it, work through that pattern. Ask yourself, why is there a pattern here? What have I experienced in my life growing up? What were my relationships like growing up? Were they healthy? Were they, conditional? And we tend to shy away from that with our head. We tend to go, I don't want to think about that. Just want to go to a party or whatever it might be. But when you do go in there, it's like getting rid of unwanted rubbish. So then you can see more clearly the relationships that you get your boundaries shift as well, about what you want to allow in and what you want to keep out. So you become more healthy within yourself. There's more self-compassion for what you might deserve. So, yeah.
And I do want to point out that it's a journey, because sometimes people hear this and they think, oh, I'm broken. I have to go back and I have to fix this so that I can finally be happy. Or we create the story of being broken or having to heal every childhood trauma and, feeling a bit overwhelmed by it. So we either feel overwhelmed or we ignore it. And what I like about tapping is that there's this gentleness to it. It's like, well, let me just lower the pressure so that bucket isn't so full. So I'm able to look at these things in a more gentle and compassionate way. And maybe I'm able to get some aha moments that can help right now. And maybe it continues to unfold. For me, it was important for me to remind myself that healing can be that way, or else we're scared. We think we're going to open the can of worms, or it feels too much. It doesn't have to be overwhelming when you have a tool that continuously brings you back to your body.
Yeah, and that's been my experience too. It usually isn't overwhelming. It's the antithesis of it. It's just kind of shaving off some of the layers and letting those out. So I think that's the beautiful part of tapping, and also that people can do it themselves if there's any ripple effects. So sometimes when you go through something in a therapy session, it can bring stuff up and other things might start stirring up. But rather than going, oh, I'm going to stuff that back down and not think about that, okay, let them pop up, let them be. And when it feels too overwhelming, your body will tell you. And so then you just slip back into what we did before, which is calming the body down, giving the body peace again. I think the body's very wise. So when you have a trigger, it's just your body going, okay, I don't want to hold on to this anymore. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to let this go? And tapping is a real invitation to do that in a gentle yet effective way, and really shift things for the better and shift things for yourself. And we can't change our mother-in-law or whoever it might be that's stuck in their ways. But we can.
By the way, I have no issue with my mother-in-law. In case she's watching this, we're bringing her up. Everything's good. It's just a universal thing.
I feel bad actually using that example. But you can't change another person, let's say. Yeah. But you can change your own responses to them and your own reactions to them internally. You may look the same on the outside. You may just say, no, I'm not standing for this. I'm going to leave or whatever. But rather than being knocked down by it or flawed by it, that's what's different with the tapping. Your own internal mechanisms shift and change. And with that comes more peace and confidence to have more of a voice. Because if you're not terrified about what the outcome will be, then the path is clearer to be able to speak your truths. And that's really communication and our interactions with people. They're never ending. We go through life. We are interacting with people at different levels owing to our own experiences in that particular time and theirs too. So even if it's the same person that you're with for a long time or a family member, everyone's on their own journey. And so the communication in that moment is going to be reflective of that time and place of where everyone's at. And so this is why we can't, it's not just 10 easy steps and you'll get it right every time, or it's not even about getting it right. It's just about trying to be at peace with saying the truth and and knowing that, okay, that's just how I feel in this moment, and
Right.
getting that out is more understanding for the other person as well.
I think we've all been in the position where we've sent that text message or that email, or we made that phone call when we haven't tapped and we're feeling upset, and we begin to communicate and we just stumble through it and make things worse. And then we look back when we're calmer and we think, oh my goodness, why did I say that? So it's so important to do the tapping, to be able to communicate in a way that really represents how you feel, and for it to be productive, really.
Yeah.
It's so
And
important
tapping
to do
can
the
be a really
tapping.
great way to prepare for one of those conversations. So if there's someone that you know you have a little bit of a conflict with at times, spend some time before you see them doing some tapping to go, oh, how's it going to feel when I go to their house? Okay, I'm feeling nervous already. Like, really imagine yourself there, visualize yourself there. Who's going to say what to you? And do some tapping ahead of time. That can really help the event unfold in a more peaceful way. Um, I often encourage clients to do finger tapping. I'm not sure that your viewers will know
Please
finger
share.
tapping in the same way. This is something that Dr. David Lake came up with and taught, and it's a beautiful thing to know as a in the tapping practice. Basically, we've got the points on each of our fingernails, and so rather than using one hand to tap the other fingernails, that's how I first learned it when I first learned EFT back in 1999. I did use this hand to tap the other hand, but a much simpler and more discreet way of doing it. So we have points. I'll come right close to the camera. They're on the side of each person's fingernail. And you use your thumb, you use the pad of your thumb to do the tapping. And you simply run up and down every finger. I encourage people to tap their ring finger. There is something called the gamut point there, but to make this process as simple as possible, it's just easier to go up and down every finger. And you just gently tap up and down, up and down. There is a point on your thumb. So you use your index finger in this case to curl over the thumb on the other side. Because if I hold my hand, I'm trying to hold my hand, it's on, the points are on the thumb side of each hand. So this is my left hand and my thumb is on the right. So each of my points is on the right-hand side of that fingernail. And if you get into the habit of doing this one regularly, say if you're going for a walk or waiting for a coffee or whatever, you can do this one in public really well. I'm not shy of doing face tapping in public, but a lot of people are. And so the fingernail tapping can be a really good support to the face tapping, because you can do it literally anywhere, anytime. You mentioned a little bit of my media work in the introduction, and I've done this one on live telly before. So, you know, it's you can do it anywhere.
Yeah.
So it's, if I was feeling an intense trigger though, I would always do the face points. I'd always have some time in a bathroom somewhere, if I'm out in public or at home, because I find the face points bring a deeper, probably quicker relief as well. But because these points are connected to my energy system, once you've used them enough too, you find that you can just tap a few of your finger points and it brings that calm to your energy system. It's all hooked in together. So it's a good one to learn for the phone call that you've got with a friend or a coworker where you're feeling some stuff. Tap the whole time. Once you get used to it, it's not intrusive. You don't have to think about it. It's just, it can become quite intuitive to do that. And it's a way of keeping your energy system clearer and cleaner and more calm as well.
Right. Well, I'd love to do some more tapping. And also for those who are watching, while we're talking, you can just, when we're not tapping on the face, you can just do these as well. I'm going to be doing this underneath my desk while we finish the interview. It's nice. I sometimes forget how great these ones feel. So Jackie, let's talk about triggers for a second. I'd love to do some tapping on some common triggers. With all of the clients that you see, do you see any common patterns when it comes to triggers within relationships?
Yeah, I do. One of the most sort of toxic ones and quite a common one is criticism, when we feel entitled, or our partner or our friend might feel entitled to criticize us. It can be a real wound and it can trigger that real fight flight response. So I would get someone to start tapping and to say something like, I'm okay, even though they said that thing.
I'm okay, even though they said that thing.
What they said to me really hurt.
What they said to me really hurt.
I can feel it in my chest, throat, stomach, wherever you feel it.
I can feel it in my throat.
They don't understand me.
They don't understand me.
And it felt painful.
And it felt painful.
But I'm doing the best I can.
But I'm doing the best I can.
And their words don't belong to me.
And their words don't belong to me.
This is about them, not me.
This is about them, not me.
And I'm a good person.
And I'm a good person.
And I'm doing the best that I can.
And I'm doing the best that I can.
And then taking a big deep breath. And I'd get this for either the receiver. In that case, I was skewing it more to the person receiving the criticism, but even for the person criticizing, they've got hurts in there too. That's why they're lashing out. It's why they're saying nasty things, perhaps. And so sometimes it's about going, looking at their hurts. Why do you feel the need to talk like that? People, when they get into a habit of criticizing, it becomes easier. You don't do this, you do this, like pointing the finger at each other. And while they're doing that, they're not actually attending to why they're reacting to, I don't know, the dishes not being done or the whatever it might be that set things off. So it's an important part of the equation to remember that both parties ideally can deal with their hurts. But if only one of the parties is doing some tapping, I think that there's this energy exchange when we're closely related to people and closely linked. So although we can't change someone, something I have sort of noticed in my time is even if it's only one person doing some tapping, maybe it's because they're calmer in their interactions when they're with them, but you can notice changes sometimes in how they talk to each other and becoming aware of being able to use kinder words. If you don't feel under attack, you're not going to try and attack someone else. So bringing down that fear response really helps the exchanges. Another common one I notice is resentments. People who don't have that voice to express the little things that go into their bucket to fill them up. Sometimes people think something's too small to bring up, or they're too scared to bring it up. But what I find with resentments, it probably is really like the gunk in the bucket. It sits under the surface. If it's still there ticking away, like a annoying mosquito at night or something, it's not gone. And so resentment can then be almost a palpable feeling. And the partner or friend might feel some tension, but not quite know why. So the antidote to that is being able to express. I know this might not seem like much, but I keep thinking about that time that this happened and I need to
express to the person.
Yeah, ideally.
Yes.
So and using tapping to get comfortable with that idea. So sometimes people feel really nervous about bringing stuff up. I have we all can feel nervous about bringing things up. And sometimes little events might resolve and they might go away from your psyche and your energy system. But if it's still there, then it's still there. And so to air it is the antidote, and to use tapping to feel comfortable enough to air it is a fantastic combination. And writing things down, writing down what it is, soothing yourself with some tapping before you share it. So then it becomes just a piece of information. And the other person can often be very grateful because they go, oh, yeah, I could feel something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was. And so then they've got more understanding of that person's pain or that person's thinking. And so they can help them because they love them. So they want to support them. So it's a good one to help that path be flowing, to keep things moving and share.
Yeah. Comes back to communication that you said. It's all about us being able to communicate better. And sometimes we're surprised by the other person's reaction. And other times, if there's a bad reaction, well, we also get to do tapping on that too. You know, we can
we do,
address that.
And to know that that's their reaction. It doesn't belong to you. It's not because of you. If someone's reacting in a really strong way, okay, that, you know, that's their journey. There might be a seed of truth you need to look at in there. We're not all perfect. We do the wrong thing sometimes. So it gives you scope to go, okay, I can own that and meet them where they need me to be as well, and listen to them. So it can be quite a calming tool. So each person gets to share what's hidden under the carpet.
Yeah. This story keeps coming to mind. It's one from my book. I worked with this client once who would always say yes to everybody. She was a nurse, so she was just the giver, the stereotypical giver. And oftentimes she would have these scheduled days off. And because they were so short-staffed, it's like almost every time she'd get a call, either the night before or the morning, being like, can you come in? And she really realized that she needed to start creating boundaries to take care of herself because she was so burnt out. And so she knew it was coming and she did tapping. And so when she got the phone call that said, please, can you come in? She was able to say no. But then the secretary said, oh, you're breaking my heart. And that was another wave of like, oh, the guilt. And she said, I'm so sorry, I can't. And she hung up the phone. But then after that, she had to tap on the words, you're breaking my heart, you're breaking my heart. Just the guilt that she felt for creating that boundary and creating space for herself in her own life. And I thought it was such a great example when she shared how she was tapping on how it's not just like a one and done. Sometimes it is with relationships, kind of at every step of the way, as we're communicating what we need. You said earlier, you don't ever arrive, you don't get there, you don't just figure out relationships and you're done. This is something that we're navigating for our whole life.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it's completely ongoing. And that ability, good for her for tapping in the first place to enable her to say no, and then to get through to make that boundary even firmer by sticking to her no. I've had to work through that one too.
Me too. Of course. I still work through that one.
Yeah. The fixer example earlier might have been personal. But it is something that and I know my indicator when it's something that I need to work on is really in my body. So it's really that tummy tension, and tapping's beautiful because I go, oh, okay, I can work with that. I can't think my way out of it necessarily, although thoughts can be really helpful too, but it's about sitting with it and being able to sit with discomfort as well, knowing that it will dissipate, and it dissipates much more quickly with tapping. So it works.
And it's almost like taking the edge off too, because there are times when you're going to have a hard conversation and tapping can help, but it doesn't make it easier. Hard conversations are still hard conversations. You can't predict what the other person's going to say. And sometimes they are uncomfortable. So it's not about taking a hard conversation and making it completely easy, but just taking the edge off so we can have that conversation from a solid foundation.
Yeah, which is ultimately going to free up more connected energy. Once you've had that, I completely agree. You know, it's hard to say something difficult to somebody else, whether it's a colleague or someone closer than that in your family.
It takes some courage.
It does take courage.
Because you don't know how the other person's going to react. So
no, and if you care about them, you don't necessarily, you don't want to hurt them, but it's information that will help you both grow. And I think, we do grow closer, I think, when we're more open and vulnerable. I think when people describe feeling more distant from their partner, it's where for some reason perhaps they don't feel safe to be vulnerable and express and also receive some painful information. It leads to understanding. It's not a good or bad situation. It just is. And so to get it out there is a blessing, I think. It's like old furniture. My sister came up with this example once about getting old. It's like getting old moldy furniture out of your basement and just on the street. It's just getting it out there. And I
Yeah,
like that analogy.
definitely. Can you talk us through how to do tapping before a difficult conversation?
Yeah, so I would try and use all your senses. So if you're a visual person, you can visualize yourself there. I'm a sensor, so I have very visual dreams, but I can't make pictures when I'm awake. So I don't visualize as such, but some people can. So let's just imagine you're going to have a conversation with this person. So I'd call up the person's face or sense them being there, perhaps hear their voice, really try and get embodied in that moment as much as you can ahead of time. It's not realistic, they're not actually there, but it does bring, it's amazing how much tension you can bring up by imagining the scenario unfolding. So that's step one. I would also take some time. I like writing things down. It helps me get clearer. So if that's helpful for people, that's great. Some people might be able to run through in their mind what they want to say. What is it that they heard about? They've already done the work, hopefully, to work out why they're triggered. What was it that set them off? Really try and get as clear as you can on what it was that made you feel that way. Once you've got that, start tapping through. So, you can set up with the karate chop, or you can just dive straight in and just even run the statements through your head. I want to say, you really hurt me when you forgot my birthday. I felt abandoned and I felt desolate, and it really made me feel pain. Whatever it might be, just run through, notice the tension in your body and keep running through those statements in your head, what it is that you want to share, until the energy subsides. Then I would try and think about the response. So work through some of the worry that they might not listen. What if they don't listen to me? What if they laugh at me when I express this? What if they are mean and say something back to me that's really awful? What if it all goes wrong and I can't say what I need to say? What if I feel silly saying what I need to say? Given that, often these resentments are small to our cognitive mind, but we feel them, so they're not nothing. So I'd run through the worry about what might happen and how that you might be responded to. I like to encourage clients to spend about 80% of time on the murky stuff, the stuff that needs to come out. That might take 5 minutes, might take 10 minutes, might take less. But once they can feel their body release, then I like to encourage people to set an intention as well in a way that they want the encounter to be. So for an example, what if they listen to me and they really hear me? What if I can speak my truth and know that I'm safe? What if I can connect with them even more deeply by sharing this information? So thinking about what it is that they want to happen. I use an 80-20 rule because we're tempted in our culture quite often to, I just want to hear the good stuff. I just want to, skip to the happy ending. But that's not realistic. We do need to work through the pain, at least somewhat, to get to the other side. So I sometimes use this expression with clients. It's a little bit gross, so bear with me. But I talk about medical practitioners. They wouldn't stitch up an infected wound without cleaning out the pus first. So they need to clean it out first and then spend time stitching. And that's probably as best a preparation as you can do for yourself. As the time comes closer, I'd probably encourage people to do it several times. If it's a big conversation, honor it, spend time with it. Maybe a week before you see this person, try and do some tapping every day. If you don't have that kind of time, that's okay. Whatever you get a chance to do will take the edge off, and it will help you be able to express yourself in a way that's less tangled than it would have been without tapping. So it's going to be a win. It may not be like 100% there, but do what you can.
I love the suggestion of writing it down and tapping. while you're reading those words. And as you were talking about spending some time with the feeling, it reminds me that oftentimes we are there anyway. Like we're in that feeling anyway. So all you're asking is go into that feeling, but now do some tapping. So you're relaxing your body while you're being present with, that tape that's running in your head that is running whether you're tapping or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And people sometimes start with one aspect of the problem. So they might think, oh, I'm going to be really upset about their tone of voice or something. And in actual fact, when they sit down to think about what the things are that they might be worried about, something else might pop up. So always go with what the energy is. You can be surprised with what you need to focus on. So that can come about with words. You can, throw the statements out. And if it's not what you need to unload in that moment, your body will give you a bit of a meh feeling, like it's there, but it's not really catching on anything. So go where the tension is. And so if you think of a different aspect of the problem or something comes to you, oftentimes with tapping, I find you clear stuff and then stories might come or memories or words or things kind of flash into your brain. So go with that. Go with what comes to you, because I think that's most present and most important. So using it a couple of different ways, learning a few different ways to do tapping is great because then you can choose. Then on another day, you might want to follow a proper script and really follow that. And that might be helpful. I think it is helpful a lot of times to make that space. Yeah. So, you can pick and choose how you can make it work for you.
Definitely. And we have a workbook where we have some questions people can fill out to gain clarity on what they want to say, what they need to tap on, and really be able to create that script for themselves.
Perfect.
Jackie, as we wrap up, any final words that you just want people to really take with them as they move forward and they're ready to do this work and improve their relationships?
I guess I'd say be kind to yourself. This is something that where relationships are not something we're automatically born knowing what to do. In fact, it's quite the opposite. And as we spoke about before, it's ever changing. It's ever changing with our own moods and ever change. So don't add the feeling of I have to get this right on top of everything else. Just be and just learn, be curious about yourself and try and uncover why you might respond in certain ways. And I think that that's going to bring beautiful information for yourself, but also for those around you and help you connect more with those loved ones.
I agree. Well, thank you so much for leading the way. It was an enlightening conversation. And well,